Welcome to How to Decorate from Ballard Designs, a weekly podcast all about the trials and triumphs of decorating and redecorating your home. I'm Caroline. I'm on the marketing team.
And I'm Taryn, and I'm a product designer.
I'm Liz. I head up the creative team.
We're your hosts. Join the expert team at Ballard Designs for tips, tricks, and tales from interior designers, stylists, and other talents in the design world.
Plus, we'll answer your decorating dilemmas at the end of each episode.
We love answering your questions, so don't forget to email us at podcast@ballarddesigns.net.
Now, on with the show.
Today, we are so excited. Our guest today is Stephanie Mahaney. And after years of being lead designer at the legendary Campbell Interiors, Stephanie launched her own design business, Stephanie Rae Interiors, in 2014. And we're so excited to have her here. Her work is bright and bold and youthful, and her firm specializes in large-scale renovation projects. Thank you so much for being here, Stephanie.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Stephanie, your business is based in Jupiter, Florida, and also in Maine. Two totally different locations and two totally different vibes, but they're both coastal. So we thought that we would take some time today to talk about decorating with a lean towards coastal.
Yeah, sounds great.
But before we get started on that, we would love to know more about you and your background and how you got into design.
I think about this a lot, actually. And always different things come to mind. But today I was thinking about it. And as a child, my mom was a psychologist, totally unrelated to design. But she was always renovating houses and moving. So we had a family unit that stayed consistent, but our houses did not. So we had like 10 different homes within our tiny 1 square mile town in Bronxville, New York. So I remember just some of my core memories as a child are like looking at wood stains, picking out antiques, going to antique stores with my mom's decorator. I loved it. And it sort of just became part of who I am, and led me to knowing I wanted to do something creative, not knowing exactly what that was. And I definitely tried out a lot of different things along the way. And then I landed at Campbell Interiors with an internship in my early 20s, and that's kind of it.
Oh, that's so awesome how it all kind of locks together like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's moving quite a bit.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah.
So, and this was all just based on your mom just loved the renovation process and and
they made money doing it. They kind of unintentionally, but they did well.
That's
They
awesome.
would buy a house, and it's really funny story. This one house she really wanted. She had her eye on it, and it was on the golf course, and it was kind of in shambles. And it was this woman, Barbara Sage. I still remember her name, and she lived there. And my mom, she lived alone. My mom would bring her meatloaf. She'd knock on her door, and she'd just say, "If you ever want to sell your house, just call me. I live here." And eventually Barbara called her, and she was downsizing, and she sold her this house. I remember it so well. And we lived through the whole renovation. I mean, we renovated the entire kitchen, lived in the basement, with one of those freezers that you open up and it's like snow and you put the batteries in it. I don't know. Does that sound right? But we had like a hot plate for us, like 7 of us living all together in the house.
Oh my gosh.
I know. That just
And
wild.
moving 7 of you that many times too is also, I hate moving, so I cannot even imagine.
I
But
know.
again, if you're in love like that, I mean, I'm sure.
Really funny. It makes you think about stuff though. And we definitely, got rid of stuff along the way.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask if you find yourself kind of minimalist from kind of, not that your work is minimalist, but just saying, from moving so often. If growing up you really weren't deep in, my mom's kind of on the hoarding side, so I'm kind of like inspired by someone whose mom's like, all right, let's get rid of, we're moving on.
Yeah, I understand both sides of it. Because I look at things and I'm just like, it's so beautiful. I just want like all the teacups in the whole world. But at the same time, I move a lot too. I find myself moving a lot. So we're looking at through things. And if I'm packing, it's like, well, that's just not going to come with us.
Yeah.
The storage unit is where it gets kind of scary when you start putting stuff in storage units.
Yeah, I could see that being a tricky effect too of
Yeah.
like, well, we have the space to put extra stuff
Yeah.
versus just cutting it, just being like, all right, this is time for someone else to love this. Let's move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you're in Florida now, officially.
I'm in Maine.
Okay,
I
you're
am
in Maine.
at the
Okay.
moment. Yes.
And all the kids are with you. Whole family unit is in Maine.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So,
We're all in Maine.
okay. So when did you move? When did this whole Maine and Florida? Because it seems like you were in Florida for a good chunk of your career and then you moved to Maine?
Yes. We moved to Maine a year ago. We are still actively doing a lot of projects in Florida, and we travel there. Like, I would say either my husband or I travels there once a month.
Okay.
So either with or without the kids, sort of just depending what the trip needs. Yeah. So, but we do projects up here and projects down there.
So with both of those being coastal and two totally different locations, what are some of the similarities and what are some of the differences that you're seeing?
I would say, I think, well, I have a lot of experience in Florida. So for me, designing, I wouldn't say that it's easy, but I have a really great grip on subs and different people down there and sort of how to pull it all together, whether someone's living there full time or seasonal. Here, if a house is truly just a seasonal summer house, that's one thing. But if the people either live in there all year round or if they come up, maybe they come up for Christmas, for Thanksgiving, pop in at different times of year, I really think you have to think about all 4 seasons. Different things are appealing at different times of year. And like, for example, a blue and white room, while it's beautiful in the summertime, sometimes it gets a little cold when it's snow outside. And it feels cold inside, if that makes sense.
So are you kind of saying, obviously you could probably do a blue dining room in Florida, but in Maine you kind of need to be like, well, it's going to be white and outside and very cold feeling. So you'll kind of explore more colors?
Definitely. I explore more colors and explore more textures too. And even in the summertime, while it's warm and beautiful and green and bright and vibrant, I think there's cold nights, especially up here in Maine on the coast. So I think that's significant.
No, that definitely makes more sense. I wanted to ask even how you felt your own personal style change with moving north.
Yeah, it changes. It's harder. It's more difficult to dress for the seasons, as they change. And, we're covered. I'm looking outside and we have like 12 inches of snow on the ground. And like, last week it was raining. And so I think and layering and I think that goes for personal like wardrobe style, but also for design style. It's like blankets and pillows and how are you living in the space and the mud and the wetness? And then in the summertime, how are you making it feel light and joyful and happy? And then how does it kind of contrast to that winter cozy kind of more inward feeling?
Yeah, that's so interesting because you've already got such a network in Florida and that vernacular in design on how to build these rooms with that style and function and weather in place. I'm wondering, what is it in Maine that you have kind of been surprised that you're leaning towards?
I think I'm leaning towards like reds and purple and these different colors mixed with the blues and the whites and sort of I like pattern in Florida too, and I like multicolor patterns. That's sort of where I start a scheme. But up here, I'm finding that I like to mix it in with things that can be put in and taken out. It's like we may have a blue or a purple velvet pillow that we could use in the wintertime that we may just, put away for the couple months in the summertime. I think things need to be more flexible, and I think things need to kind of move in and out. I think that makes sense to me. It's sort of that old-fashioned, like the winter weight duvets and the summer weight duvets. These things they just move. In the springtime, you reassess. In the fall, you reassess. And I think thinking about that with the movable objects in design makes sense too. And I also think it freshens everything up and it prepares you for what's to come, which I think is really beautiful. If there's that flexibility to work with. So I think zippers on your pillows so that you don't have to store the whole pillow. You can just zip off the cover and switch it out. And they can still be custom. They don't need to be, anything that isn't exactly perfect for the space.
Mm-hmm.
So do you find that you're starting projects differently in those two different locations?
In terms of, there are less people hiring interior decorators. That's what I found in Maine. So my husband, who's a builder, we're doing more development projects with architects and with realtors. So I think what's going on up here is there's a huge shortage of houses, huge shortage of real estate. So people want to move to Maine, buy second homes in Maine and live on the coast, but they're finding that there's nothing available that's done, first of all. And second of all, if they do find something that needs a bit of work, a lot of the really good builders are 2 or 3 years out. So it seems like, oh, that's too long. I want to live my life now. And I could handle maybe a year to 18 months, but 3 years is a really long time to wait. So
yeah.
So that's what we found. We've talked to a lot of realtors and people, and there's a huge demand for real estate in Maine. It's just that, the building process is a bit longer. So we're kind of leaning into that and leaning into development.
That's so fun. So you're kind of seeing this pivot kind of in your career, you would say, or?
Yeah, definitely. I think up here for sure, we're looking at development projects anywhere from, one home, $3 to $5 million range to 30 home developments in like Western and coastal Maine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so different. That's great.
So different. Yeah.
Yeah. Seeing as you're now living and breathing this, what if somebody is just starting, do you have any good starting tips or tricks?
So just starting, meaning they just bought the land.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
They've picked a property.
They picked a property. I think it's really important to, look at builders in the area and talk to them about architects. You can go either way. Find your designer in the area and find builders and architects from there, which I think is really nice because the designer, I might be biased, but in my opinion, they'll find a really great team and they know who they like working with, whereas a builder may not know a designer. A builder will know architects, but I think that designer piece sometimes comes in later. And I think if you're building this high-end home and especially a second home where you're not there, it's really important to have the team in place, the architect, the builder, and the designer from the beginning so that you don't run into issues. Say an architect puts 2 windows in a bedroom that are far enough apart for a queen bed, but you want a king bed. And then the designer comes in and says, we have a king bed going in this room. We need to move the windows. It's just kind of working backwards.
So who runs point on this? So is it the designer that leads the project? Is it the architect? Is it the builder?
It is such a collaboration. And that's sort of where the art of it all comes in. I would say in the beginning, it would be heavy on the architect and the designer working together. And then from there, the builder will come in. But it really depends on the type of builder. Some builders like to be given plans and go from there. And some builders have really amazing ideas and have been doing it a really long time and are super incredible and really beneficial to have in from the beginning.
I was going to ask the same question, Liz, because I was like, so who is kind of leading this?
And I think it's important from the beginning to know that it is a collaboration. It is about the project and it is about the client. I think a lot of egos can get heavy involved, which is unnecessary. And at the end of the day, you're building a structure that fits the space. I think that's really important. What belongs on the piece of property, what makes sense there, and it's the client's home. It's where they're living and breathing, and they're with their families, and all of that should come into play very from the beginning.
Yeah.
So what type of questions are you asking your clients that are coming to you with a fresh new build?
Like they're just starting it? What kind of questions am I asking? I am asking who is living here. That's first. Do you have dogs? Do you have pets? How often are you here? Who are each of the bedrooms for? Do you like to entertain? Do you like to cook? What kind of spaces do you not have in your current home? What really frustrates you about your current home? What's really important to you? Everybody's really different. Some people, their dogs are really important to them, and they want a space for their dog food and their dog bowls and all of that stuff. And I think that should be considered from the beginning.
I love thinking about like what frustrates you about your current home, because we all have those frustrations, but to kind of bring that to the table when you've got something that's starting from scratch is kind of exciting.
Yes.
And you can fix those issues or pinpoint those issues right off the bat.
Yeah.
And build towards something better.
Yeah. It's like, and it may seem little to a client. Like, it really annoys me that when I get out of the shower, I'm freezing cold. Oh, well, maybe we could do heated floors, or maybe, who knows what it is. But it's these things that happen every single day that can be addressed.
Yeah. And that feeling of like, well, if something new is just going to fix all of these problems, you kind of have to pinpoint what those problems are.
Yes. Yes. And you could go a long way with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you do need to do it at the beginning, because again, you can't have the floor already laid down and then say, actually, I remember now I don't like being cold when I get out the shower.
I really hate that. It really bothers me.
I feel like that should be a given, because who likes to get out of the shower cold? Let's just run some heated floors everywhere.
Yeah, let's just do it.
So what is how do you see the role of the builder, seeing as you're somebody who works with the architect and the builder? Because, like, to your point, the heated floor part, is that a conversation you would have had with the whole team, or with the architect, or with you, or the builder?
I think from the beginning, it's really, really important to kind of create a Venn diagram of who's responsible for what.
Okay.
Not meaning I can't discuss this with you, but it's really important for us and the client to know, I might be picking out my plumbing trims with you, but my builder is ordering it. Same goes for tile. Same goes for me. For me, for our company, if the builder is installing it, he also purchases it, which for me makes sense, because then they deal with the receiving, the install. See, there's an issue with install, but I didn't hire the installer. The builder did. Who does that fall on? So I just say, I just consult on that side of things.
Okay.
And I make that really clear from the beginning. And then it's not an issue, because I understand it's part of their markup a lot of the time. And they go into their business planning thinking, I'm going to order the appliances and the plumbing, and all that stuff adds up.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think it could piss them off. And to be honest with you, and nobody wants the builder and the designer mad at each other.
No.
The worst.
Or the architect. Yeah.
Or the architect. Yes. Yes. So that's really what we do. And my husband, if he's not building the house that we're working on, he will sometimes act as an owner's rep, which may have like a bad connotation depending on a builder's experience. But his goal is really to just be there for the client. And if the client isn't available, to kind of be the words and feelings of the client in these meetings, because they're not always available. But it's important that the client always has a voice.
Yeah, that seems like such an important role to have. So that's...
Yes, especially in these high-end second or third homes that people are building. These clients don't necessarily have time to be at every single meeting, but it's also really important that they don't get taken advantage of.
Yeah. And they can't be there again when you lay the tile wrong, or, to say, hey, I wanted it laid, in this other direction. So, yeah.
Yeah, and costs come in, And I think for us, it's just being transparent is the most important thing, and knowing from the beginning that we expect everybody to be transparent makes it so much easier.
So what are some considerations, if you do have a client that's building a second home and you know that this is going to be seasonal, what are some, you mentioned you want to build for year-round use, but what are you really kind of going into thinking about for something that's going to be a second home, a seasonal?
I think it's really important to bring in an element of fun. This is somewhere they're going for vacation. It's not somewhere where they're living. It's like when you walk into this space, how do you want to feel? Do you want to feel like you're on vacation? And if so, what can we kind of add and suggest to elevate that? Maybe a different type of shower configuration that you have at home, something not as, what's the word I'm thinking of? Illogical. Maybe we want something a little bit illogical. Maybe you want a sauna. Maybe you want a cold plunge, a wellness area. I think it's important for it to feel different and to feel like a place where a client could find peace and have a different experience than they have at their regular year-round house.
Yeah. That makes me think, like, how are you using your year-round house and and what do you want from something that you can have anything? That's
Yeah.
so exciting.
Yeah, and people don't always know all the options. It's like people are so busy all the time that I like to think that my husband and I kind of take a step back and think, what's the purpose? What's the feeling that this client wants? And what can we suggest that they don't have the time to think about?
Well, and that's what's great about, again, a designer or builder or an architect is it's definitely most people, they don't get to do this often. So again, if they do, they're missing all, like you said, they might not know what the options are. So having them presented to them.
Such a good point. It's like for me, I do this all day, every day. And for them, it might be once or twice in a lifetime. And it's for their children and their grandchildren. And this is really, really important. Yeah.
So what are some things that you're seeing out in the marketplace or in trends, or I hate to say the word trends because it's the spaces that you're building are really not trendy at all. They really do have a tradition and longevity to them. But I'm wondering, what are some of the things that you're seeing out there that are exciting? Like a plunge bath. I mean,
oh, yeah. Yeah. Lots of stuff. I see tons of rechargeable lighting. That's like sticks out to me as something I saw a lot of at High Point. I'm also seeing tons of small wallpaper companies. I'm looking back behind you. Is it a mural or a wallpaper? It's so beautiful. But I'm seeing lots of that, lots of more risks, more risky choices is what I'm seeing. Different, upholstery companies having more options than just 100 different neutrals to choose from. They have patterns and colors and welts and trims, and I think that that's really exciting.
so what type of risks are you excited about and moving your clients toward?
I would say something and I don't know if it's a risk, but I think something that's really important and people a lot of times don't think about until the end is artwork. And I think it can feel risky, right? Because artwork's expensive a lot of the time. Real artwork can be expensive. But I think that I'm really trying to push my clients towards real artwork because I don't want them to feel like they have to take their artwork off the walls in 2 or 5 years because it's trendy or because they don't love it anymore. I think there's an element to a handmade piece of art that lasts and feels a little scary and risky because it is expensive. But I think that's what I've been thinking about a lot.
Yeah, that's really exciting because art can make a space so personal.
Yes.
Well, and I do think it's the last thing in a lot of places. Like it's the last piece you really thought about in a room, when sometimes it can definitely be the first piece to design around. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's important to collect art, and it doesn't have to be every single piece of art. Obviously, that's can be unattainable, but I think even just putting it in their brains throughout the process, so they're looking and aware, and I'll go on trips for or with clients to look at artwork, and for me that's really important because that's something they look at every day, and it's something also that's reflecting who they are.
So, are you going to galleries? Are you working with art reps? Like, what is the advantage to both, either, finding individual artists?
I do it all. I work with galleries. I find individual artists. I go to different art shows, the Art Basel, and there's a show in Art Palm Beach, which I couldn't make it, but one of my friends works with a lot of art, and he was there. He had a booth there, and so he sends me his selections and things. So I'm like constantly looking at and perusing different art all the time.
Looping back a little bit to coastal,
Yes.
are you having your art lean coastal because of the locations that you're building in?
It's really funny. I was talking to Polly. He's like, I don't even know what his title is. He does all the new acquisitions for Hollis Taggart. And he's like, I put this show together for Art Palm Beach, and I was really thinking about you. And I was like, do I have like a feeling about me when it comes to art? And it was all sort of like bright and I don't know, it was not neutral at all. And and I'm thinking, but I feel that way no matter where I am. That's just what I lean towards. I lean towards sort of bold artwork. I don't really lean towards artwork that feels like it's going away into the wall.
Yeah.
So I think it doesn't need to match the room at all. I think artwork it could feel right in the space, but if you have like a room that is turquoise and purple and white, you could have a yellow and orange piece of art, and that would be okay. And good. Yeah, that would be a really great thing.
I was going to say, just looking at your portfolio, I'd say most of your rooms are bright, so it totally makes sense too that you lean that way.
Yeah.
Well, I think the reason we really wanted to focus some on the coastal kind of, some tangible things is because so many of us have walked into a rental home or someone's beach home, and it's been just that level of cheese that that really dates it and doesn't make it feel polished. So of course your work is gorgeous and doesn't scream flip-flops, beach this way sign. So we really want to try to get help, people just listening. How can we attain a beautiful home that feels coastal without, again, having to go to flip-flop?
Yes,
OTs.
we want to break the chains on the flip-flops.
Yes, I think don't get anything that says anything. Like artwork that says anything at all, really. We could just get rid of it. Unless it's some of those really cool neon signs, I'd be okay with, depending on where it was and what it was saying.
Mm-hmm.
If that sounds about right.
I really wanted one years ago, but I couldn't get over the glow it was going to have on the room. I was worried the lighting would be so weird with it. That was my biggest fear, even though they look so cool.
Yeah.
So
my client had one in an install we recently did, but it's a bar that has retractable doors, so we can close it and you don't get the glow.
That's a good place.
If you're having a party, it just says bar and it's plug-in, neon sign, and it's I kind of love it. I'm it's just this green neon sign. I'm digging it. But generally, I would say, the sign that says tiki bar or beach or any of that stuff. And you have to be very, very careful with the use of shells.
Okay.
How
do we use shells? Yeah, because you have them in your work beautifully as art on the wall, and again, nothing silly. So how do we do shells?
Yeah, I would say if you're getting it from a Marshall's or TJ Maxx, generally it's difficult to make it not feel like that. So, but that being said, you don't have to spend a lot of money necessarily. But I think if you're buying something handmade from Etsy with shells, it may land a little bit different than if you're buying one of 5 million from Marshall's.
Something that's produced versus
it feels
crafty.
Different, and it feels kitschy and but I think there's these beautiful sailor's valentines, if you guys have ever heard of them. They're the concept that sailors used to make these valentines for their people at home, and they're beautifully created and vintage. And those are shells, and they're shadow boxes with shells in them, and they're called sailor valentines. Those are really amazing and definitely lean coastal. I think no matter where you are on the East Coast, at least.
Yeah.
I think collected shells are really beautiful. Things that you
Mhm.
or your family has collected. Using those is a beautiful way to do it. I think it's important to use natural materials. But you guys know, like, the difference between a piece of driftwood on a coffee table that actually wasn't found at the beach.
Yeah.
Oh, you're like, this is natural, but it's not really natural. It's like fake natural. I
Mhm.
think that can really go in a direction quickly, but using natural wood floors, like natural teak frames, that kind of thing, that leans more towards classic and has
Yeah.
longevity to it.
No, I mean, I think that makes sense because it's almost like sea glass too. Found, it's so special and, a treasure, but rolled in where they roll it and then just produce pieces of glass, you're like, well, that doesn't feel the exact same.
No, it doesn't.
So,
It has like a vibration to it if you found it and if it's special to you.
yeah. Well, how about color? Because I think color is so significant to you. But again, your places all still feel so fresh and in place. They even though you're on the coast, you have incorporated such beautiful kind of pastels. So I just want to talk more about color near the
Yeah.
beach.
Yeah, I think you can. I generally lean, and I learned this at Campbell for sure, lean away from muddy colors in the paint chips and
Mm-hmm.
on the fabrics. I just don't love muddy colors,
Okay.
grays, that kind of thing. I like mixing colors and mixing patterns. I think it's really important. First of all, that the colors work well together in a scheme. They don't necessarily have to be the same color on every fabric,
Mm-hmm.
but they just have to be cohesive and work well together. And I think it's really, really important when you're using color and pattern that you use the scales correctly. So you have a large scale, maybe a ditz, maybe a solid with a trim. That kind of thing is really important to think about when decorating with color, I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those kind of balances with pattern and scale and texture are so important.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
but they're also really difficult to get right.
They're difficult to get right. Yeah, and I know, and not everybody in the world can, like, get samples of everything and look at it in a
Yeah.
large scale, and if you get a sample, it's this big, and you have there's no concept of scale.
Yeah.
So that's something that's just so important, and I lay things out, and I look at them a million times, and I move them around, and does this scale and for a big scale, if you have a really big scale pattern, maybe you don't use it just on a pillow because you're losing it and you won't see it
Yeah.
and you won't get the concept of it. Maybe use it on a headboard, or if
Mm-hmm.
you're not cost conscious, you could use it on curtains. But
Yeah.
yeah, thinking about all of that stuff.
Yeah, that's great to think about, like, where the focal point is, because on a headboard, you want your eye to go straight to the bed. That's the hero of the room, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so using a big scale pattern there would make a lot of sense.
And it's cost effective because you don't need that much fabric to make a headboard, whereas curtains, you need a ton of fabric. So that's something I actually learned from a designer in Palm Beach, actually from my curtain maker, my workroom, he's retired since then, but I was really lucky to have worked with Paul Maybaum down in Palm Beach for a while. And even, how curtains are usually white on the back?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the projects that I worked on with Campbell and on my own, I use a pinstripe instead of a solid.
Mm-hmm.
And it just elevates the curtains enough. Either way, you're buying the fabric.
Yeah.
And there are lots of companies that make really inexpensive, well-priced, tiny, tiny stripes. So we could use a blue and white. We could use a neutral and white, but just something so that this is what you see when you drive up to the house. And instead of just seeing a white curtain closed, you see these stripes.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a nice little detail.
Yeah.
Kind of like flashing open a fancy blazer that, has like a great pattern inside.
Yeah.
Is it a heavy
No,
stripe?
like a linen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not going to bleed
Or
through if the sun's coming through.
No. And usually there's a liner in between the two.
Mm.
Yeah. So depending on who's making the curtains, because everybody makes them different. And I think that's what I learned. That's another thing I learned at Campbell is like it really, really matters who's making these things and what is going into it. So I've spent a lot of time in workrooms at those, 50-foot long tables they lay out the entire curtain and you see, there's your fabric that you see. And then there's the inner lining, which is like more of it's almost like a fleece. I wouldn't say it's a fleece, but it's like a thicker fabric that has a softness to it. It depends what you're doing in the space. And then you could do that backing, that striped fabric in the back.
That's really interesting because I would think that would really help the drapes hang and really help with the weight of the drapery panels.
Yeah.
But it would also help with like sound absorption.
Definitely.
Especially if it's a large space and heat retention and air, right?
Yeah.
No,
but a lot
really
of
smart.
companies don't even know. A lot of drapery companies, it's like a lost art, right? You know the people who are doing it know how to do it. And it doesn't matter in every single space, but certain spaces require this.
Okay, so that's definitely worth the investment. Look into it. Put your money there.
Yeah.
Are there any things on the flip side that feel like they are places where you can get a lot of bang for your buck?
I think depending on the room, you can get a lot of bang for your buck with rugs. If you're using them all the time, yes, invest in it in main spaces. But I don't think you need to invest in, $30,000 rugs in every room. You can get like this rush house. I don't know if you guys know, like the seagrass woven, hand woven rugs. Those are so great and they don't cost that much money. And I have one in my mudroom and it looks brand new, even through all the mud and the snow. And they're really great for high traffic areas they're great for underneath a rug. Say you have a room that's 20 by 16 and it's massive. And you want a nice rug in the middle, but you also don't want the rug to feel like a postage stamp and be too small. You could do something like that, like a sisal or a rush house type of rug that fits the space and then do a layer on top.
Yeah, those are so great for defining spaces too.
Yeah.
Especially in an open concept area.
100%. And getting that natural element. Again, talking about bringing texture into a space, it really does help to have that natural material.
Yeah.
And especially going back to your coastal thing.
Yeah. It's easy to use. And I think that's like, you could use that anywhere.
It's not even, I was going to say, you could be in, again, Kansas and use, right? It's not necessarily just Florida or anything coastal.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to talk next just about because currently on your website, you're working on a barn in Maine. And I wanted to know more about that project. How's it going? What started it and all the fun details.
Yeah, sort of what started is there's this compound movement, I feel like, in Maine. These people want, compounds for their family to come to. I think a lot of the wealth in the country, after all the different podcasts I've listened to, seem to be in this baby boomer generation and like people in their 60s, and they have children and they have grandchildren and they want everybody to be able to come and enjoy their spaces. And with homes getting more and more expensive, I think the younger generation isn't necessarily buying their own homes. Mm-hmm. So it's nice for this generation of people to be able to have their family but not be on top of each other, because that's suffocating.
Yeah.
And everyone doesn't want that, It's like, you want your grandchildren around, but you don't want to clean up yogurt on the wall. So I think that's where this started, was let's build a space that's great for grandchildren and is on the property. It's a large piece of property, but isn't in the main house. Mm-hmm. So it's almost done. We're photographing it in March, and we're just kind of doing the finishing touches now. And it's really cool. It's sort of it's 7,000 square feet. Half of it is an indoor-outdoor space. And it could be a pickleball court, but it also has a huge, massive fireplace that can be really cozy, and we can bring indoor-outdoor furniture into. And at the far end of that space is a gym space.
Okay.
So in the summertime, it's kind of like working out outside, but if it's raining, you can do it. Not really usable in the winter, unless it could host a wedding. an event, something like that. Very cool. And then you walk up the stairs and you walk through a door and it's now an all seasons space. So you have a kitchen, you have a downstairs sort of family room, game room type of thing with 2 bedrooms, a bunk room and a queen room. And then you go back upstairs, up some more stairs, and you're in this A-frame bedroom that is all glass on one side of the A-frame, and you're like in the trees in the forest.
Yeah. You have a few pictures of that, and it looks like that's a beautiful space.
It's so cool. It's so cool. And I think it's flexible in that, it can be, that part of it can be used for all seasons, but the main part of it is really for the summertime.
Okay. Yeah. How did you decorate the room that was pretty much windows and you wanted to look outside? How did you kind of take a stab at that?
I think I talked to the architect. The architect and I had sort of like a working session. They're at Lake Flato out of Texas. And I was like, what's the original intent of this space and how do you envision it? And I just really wanted his insight into it. And it really resonated with where I was going with it. I added a little bit of pattern on the chairs and the rug opposite the bed. But the bed I made, the issue I was having was it's an A-frame, so the ceiling comes all the way down to the floor.
Yeah.
So wherever the bed, I didn't want the bed to feel like it was floating and didn't have anywhere to be. So I made the headboard, the height, 4 feet, and it's 4 feet off where the floor meets the ceiling.
Yeah.
And I made it long so that it didn't feel like there's a big empty shadow space behind the bed, even though there is. And super simple. I made it green because I didn't want it to take away from the outside at all. It's a solid fabric, and I same with the side tables. I made them black and heavy, and I really just wanted people to look outside when they're in the space, to not be distracted by any of the furniture.
Did that theme, I assume, go through the whole space? Probably.
Yeah. I took a few more chances downstairs with color and stuff because it is a basement with window wells. So there's light coming into the bedrooms, but that main family room, game room downstairs, if the doors are closed, no natural light.
Okay.
So I kind of thought, it's a dark room. I'm not going to try to make it light. My motto is sort of like, I like to take a message from the light in the space. If it's a dark room, I'm not going to work against it. I'm going to work with it. So I used a lime wash plaster and made it all green, dark, really cozy.
Ooh.
And can be used for a really long time. The sofas I made with our upholsterer down in Florida, and they're so durable. He's not going to need to get another sofa for 20 years.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's
lots of jumping.
Lots.
Right. Excellent place to play hot lava.
Yes.
So today, our dilemma is from Gabriella. She says, hello. I've been listening to your podcast for a while and finally decided to send you my dilemma. I don't love my dining set and I want to get a new one. I'm open to keeping the table and getting new chairs or vice versa, or just getting both new. I have no idea what will look good in here or if I should keep this rug that keeps snagging or get a new one. I'm just lost. I love everything else in this room except the dining set and rug. Please help. So,
okay.
Let's describe the space for a quick second. Gabriella has a beautiful dining room, and with a beautiful built-in hutch that kind of grounds the space. And then, right in the center, she's got her dining set and the rug. That's the culprit. What would you do with this space, Stephanie?
I would say definitely get a new rug. So something I learned early on, and I'm so grateful for, is that if your rug is too small for the space, it makes everything look small and out of place. So I think what's really cool, and there's some amazing companies out there that do it, is you measure the space and you, in a small space, take 6 inches off the walls and you get a rug that fits that space. It will immediately make the room look larger and more put together. And from there, I can't quite tell, but I think it's pretty square. So I like the concept of having a round table, but it looks like it could be a tiny bit bigger. Say maybe this is a 54-inch table. I think we could push to a 60-inch table and you could get 6 chairs in instead of 4 chairs. So yeah, I would definitely get a new rug, and a new table, a little bit larger. And I think I would push for 6 chairs.
What do you think stylistically? She's got some really great elements, like she's got a mural on the wall, a little triptych that's built into some paneling.
I think what would be amazing in here is some texture on the chairs. So I mean, there are some amazing lucite chairs with like a natural like lamb fur seat that would be really beautiful in here, just to add a little bit of texture. For the table, I mean, she could even take like a dark forest green and she could have like a lacquered table in this room, and then work off of that. She could do chairs that have a pattern, I really think, to them, because other than the mural, there's no patterns at all in the space. And I think that's what's challenging about dining rooms in general, is you have a lot of hard pieces and it can feel not so cozy. So I think getting a cozy rug that fits the space will be huge and go a long way. You obviously want something that isn't going to catch food in it. Like, I wouldn't necessarily recommend a sisal or a natural rug that can't be cleaned in here. I think wool makes a lot of sense in dining rooms. At least in my house, it's inevitable that food's going to fall on the ground. So I would definitely do something like that. Even a pattern, a stripe in the rug would be really beautiful. And then I see like a high gloss table in the middle would be amazing, with chairs that have either a smaller pattern or a textured fabric, like a highly textured fabric, not boucle, but something that has dimension to it.
All right, so we're definitely adding scale with a larger table, and we're adding textures, like mixing high gloss, mixing potentially some acrylic in there, and then pattern. And yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing.
And I think she could get away with something taller on the dining room table. Maybe not for when you're sitting there eating, but something like beautiful and tall, beautiful, tall vase. Yeah. Something collected. Yeah. Even like a vase that's collected, antique, vintage, something like that.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Just bringing height into the space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That would be great, because your eye kind of goes straight to the back of the room, to the hutch.
Yeah.
Because it's so bold, but you kind of want your eye to stop at the table, because that's where you want people to stop and sit.
Yeah. On the other hand, you could paint the hutch. You could high gloss the hutch too. If you couldn't find a table that was available, you could get a natural finish on the table. I honestly don't even mind the finish on the table as it is. It looks like it's like steel with like a or some kind of metal and natural wood. And then you could add in this kind of unexpected high gloss that would balance out the mural on the back on the hutch.
That would be really fun.
Even wallpaper behind the glass would be cool.
So fun.
Yeah, I like where you're going with that. That's really fun. That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Gabriella, I hope you fall in love with your dining room soon, and you find all the pieces that bring in some color and texture and really make this space great. Because the structure of this room is really fantastic.
Love it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie, for joining us today. Can you let everyone know where they can find you or follow you?
Yeah, my website is just stephanieraeinteriors.com. And my Instagram is the same, at Stephanie Rae Interiors. Keeping it simple.
So
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
That's our show.
Thank you.
And that's our show. You can find all of the show notes on our blog, howtodecorate.com/podcast.
To send in a decorating dilemma, email your questions to podcast@ballarddesigns.net so we can help you with your space.
And of course, be sure to follow us on social media at Ballard Designs.
Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. And please leave us a review. We'd love to hear your feedback.
Until next time, happy
Happy
decorating.